The house was quiet when the couch finally gave up. One small crack turned into a sharp snap, and the leg folded like it had been tired for years. Ethan stood still in the living room, staring down at the broken wood, feeling silly and frustrated at the same time. It was late, his long workday still heavy on his shoulders, and the idea of fixing furniture at midnight felt impossible. Upstairs, the house breathed softly. Lily was asleep, sick with a bad flu that had kept her in bed for 2 days, her breathing uneven but calm, and Ethan did not want to wake her. He rubbed his face and looked around. The guest room was closed off because of a leaking ceiling, boxes stacked high, tools everywhere, no space to sleep. That was when he heard footsteps, slow and careful. Margaret appeared at the edge of the hallway, wearing a soft sweater, her hair tied back loosely, eyes alert even in the low light. She looked at the couch, then at Ethan, and sighed like she already understood everything. "You cannot sleep on the floor," she said quietly, her voice firm but not unkind. Ethan tried to smile, said it was fine, said he would manage, but Margaret shook her head, stepping closer, pointing toward the stairs. "Lily needs rest," she said, "and you need sleep too. The bed is big enough. Take the other side, just for tonight." The words landed heavier than they should have. Ethan felt his chest tighten, not because of anything wrong, but because of how unexpected it was. He opened his mouth to argue again, but Margaret's expression stopped him. It was not awkward, not teasing, it was practical, caring, almost motherly. "This house has been through worse," she added, like she was reminding herself as much as him. Ethan nodded slowly, the decision made before his thoughts could catch up. He picked up a blanket, stepped carefully toward the stairs, and felt the house shift around him, as if it noticed the change too. Margaret followed behind, not too close, not too far, the hallway light casting long shadows, memories hanging in the walls, old photos, family smiles frozen in time. The bedroom door opened quietly. The room smelled clean and familiar. Lily lay in the middle of the bed, her face pale, hair spread across the pillow. Ethan felt a wave of love and guilt wash over him. He moved gently, sliding onto the far edge, careful not to disturb her. Margaret turned off the light and lay down on the opposite side, leaving space between them, space that felt wider than it really was. The darkness settled, thick and alive, broken only by Lily's breathing and the faint sound of the clock down the hall. Ethan stared at the ceiling, his mind racing, telling himself this was normal, that families did things like this in hard moments. Still, his body refused to relax. He felt every movement, every shift of the mattress, every breath that was not his own. Margaret lay still too, facing away, her back to him, but he could sense she was awake, the air between them charged with awareness, not desire, not intention, just two adults forced into closeness by circumstance. Minutes stretched, then hours. The night moved fast and slow at the same time. Ethan thought about how he ended up here, moving into his wife's childhood home after her father passed, promising stability, promising strength. Margaret had welcomed him with polite warmth, never crossing lines, always respectful, always watching from a distance. She carried grief quietly, running the house, caring for Lily even as Lily grew into her own life. Ethan had admired that strength from afar, never questioning it, never looking deeper, until this night pressed them into the same space. A car passed outside, headlights brushing the curtains. For a second the room glowed softly, and Ethan saw Margaret's face reflected faintly in the mirror, calm but tired. He wondered how long she had carried everything alone. Lily stirred slightly, murmured something in her sleep. Ethan reached out without thinking, adjusting the blanket around her. Margaret noticed. He felt it, not through touch, but through the shift in the room, a shared awareness of care. "Thank you," Margaret whispered, barely louder than a breath. Ethan nodded in the dark, unsure if she could see, his throat tight. After that, silence returned, but it was different now, softer, almost fragile. Ethan's thoughts slowed, exhaustion finally pulling him under, but not before a strange feeling settled in his chest, a sense that something small had changed, something he could not name yet. He dreamed lightly, fragments of sound and memory, the couch breaking again, footsteps in a hallway, a voice calling his name. When he woke suddenly, he was not sure what had pulled him back. The room was still dark, but dawn was close, a faint blue light edging the window. Margaret was sitting up, careful not to wake Lily, her face thoughtful, hands resting in her lap. She did not notice him at first, lost in her own thoughts, and Ethan felt like he was seeing her clearly for the first time, not as his mother-in-law, not as the woman in charge, but as someone human, tired, and awake in the quiet before morning. She turned then, surprised to see his eyes open. A small pause passed between them, heavy but gentle. Neither spoke, neither smiled, neither looked away. The house held its breath, and Ethan realized this night, meant to be simple, had already begun to leave a mark, one that would not fade easily, even after the couch was fixed, even after morning came. Morning arrived slowly, sunlight spilling across the kitchen floor, catching dust in the corners, warming the coffee that Ethan poured with hands still stiff from sleep. Margaret was already awake, sitting at the table with a mug in her hands, the steam curling gently into the air, her eyes quiet, thoughtful, watching the sun move across the walls. Ethan paused in the doorway, unsure if he should speak first, unsure if the tension from last night could be acknowledged without words. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm, almost casual, apologizing for the broken couch, for the awkwardness of the night, for the sudden insistence. Ethan shook his head, saying it was fine, that it was only a broken couch, that families helped each other. But her gaze lingered, gentle yet firm, and he felt a quiet weight in her concern. It was strange, he thought, how something so small could feel so large, how a broken piece of furniture could draw people into a closeness that was neither expected nor entirely comfortable. The days that followed carried a rhythm of subtle shifts, the couch still broken, the guest room still inaccessible, Lily still under the weather. Margaret's insistence became routine, a quiet reminder each night that he should not sleep on the floor, that he should take the other side of the bed. Ethan hesitated less each evening, moving through the motions without question, though each time, a strange tension tightened in his chest. He noticed small things he had never paid attention to before, the way Margaret's hair caught the light, the way she sighed when she thought no one was watching, the small lines of worry around her eyes. Margaret noticed him too, the careful way he handled dishes, the patience he showed Lily, the way he listened without judgment. Neither spoke of the tension that built between them, but it grew quietly, invisible, like a storm gathering beyond the horizon. Their conversations began after Lily had fallen asleep, soft voices echoing in the darkened house, about ordinary things at first, work, the weather, neighborhood events. But soon the words deepened, touching more personal spaces, sharing small fragments of their lives that no one else knew. Margaret spoke of her late husband, of quiet nights that felt too long, of the loneliness she carried even in a full house. Ethan spoke of the pressure he felt at work, the moments when he wished someone would just see him, hear him without trying to fix him. Their words lingered between them, heavy with meaning, tender with understanding, and they felt a connection neither had expected, born out of proximity, empathy, and quiet care. Ethan began to notice how he waited for these moments, how his day felt incomplete without the small conversation at night. Margaret began to feel a similar pull, a warmth she had not realized she missed, noticing how easy it was to talk to him, how safe it felt to share. Neither wanted to admit it to themselves, the closeness brushing at boundaries they knew they should respect. Yet one night, the storm outside mirrored the storm inside the room, lightning flashing across the windows, thunder shaking the walls. Margaret reached for the lamp to read, her hand brushing against Ethan's accidentally, a touch so fleeting it could be ignored. But neither pulled away, holding that small connection for a heartbeat too long, feeling the charge of it, sensing the pull, knowing it was dangerous. Ethan's heart raced, confusion mixing with longing, a strange ache that was difficult to name. Margaret felt it too, a flutter she had not felt in years, the reminder that she was human, alive, capable of feeling beyond responsibility and routine. They lay quietly, pretending the moment did not matter, pretending the storm outside was the only thing breaking, but they knew it was different. The house held its usual calm, but inside the room, time seemed to slow, each second stretching with unspoken possibilities. Ethan thought of Lily, sleeping between them, innocent and unaware, a gentle reminder of why lines had to be drawn. Margaret thought of her own past, of promises made silently to herself to always protect, to always be careful, to never let desire interfere with family. Over the next few days, they fell into a delicate routine, speaking less of the tension, but with glances that said more than words could. They shared smiles that lingered, touches that were accidental but meaningful. Ethan found himself pausing at the doorways, watching Margaret move through the house, noting the small ways she cared for Lily, for the home, for him. Margaret noticed the same things about him, the way he carried responsibility lightly but firmly, the patience in his movements, the honesty in his eyes. Even the broken couch became a symbol, a strange excuse for closeness, a reminder of the night that shifted something quietly between them. One evening, after Lily had drifted into sleep, Margaret moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside to watch the stars. Ethan lingered, pretending to adjust a blanket, but really just watching her, feeling a strange pull in his chest that was half admiration, half something more. She sensed him there, and without looking, said softly, "I know," referring to something neither had named, but both understood. The words hung in the air, unspoken and heavy, and Ethan realized that the house no longer felt entirely safe from emotion, that the walls themselves seemed to know their thoughts, their quiet attraction, their delicate curiosity. Neither spoke again that night, yet the air between them had changed, charged with awareness, with something fragile, something they could neither claim nor deny. Ethan lay awake long after Margaret had gone to her side of the bed, thinking about how quickly life could shift, how a broken couch, a sleepless night, could bring two people to the edge of a feeling they were not meant to cross. Margaret stared at the ceiling, thinking of the same, knowing the line had been approached, knowing that the quiet care that had always been part of her life was now more dangerous than she had imagined. They both understood that they had to be careful, that this was a moment suspended between temptation and respect. Yet neither could deny the warmth that lingered, the understanding that had grown from those quiet conversations, from the nights spent forced together by circumstance. It was a subtle pull, a gentle longing, an awareness of each other that was as beautiful as it was forbidden. Each night after that, the storm inside them quieted only slightly, but never disappeared. They learned to navigate it carefully, to speak when needed, to pause when necessary. Yet deep down, they both knew that the closeness, the understanding, the connection, had changed everything. One evening, lightning flashed again, briefly illuminating Margaret's face in the darkness, her eyes reflecting a flicker of thought, a question she did not voice. Ethan noticed it immediately, heart tightening, sensing that the unspoken acknowledgement had returned, stronger than before. The house was still and quiet, but the air was electric, charged with the consequences of emotions neither had anticipated. They lay in the same room, side by side, hearts racing in silence, waiting for sleep that would not come easily. And in that silence, each of them realized that the bond between them had grown deeper, complicated, and impossible to ignore. The nights continued, each one filled with small conversations, lingering glances, accidental touches that left them both unsettled and awake. Ethan found himself thinking of her during the day, recalling the warmth of her words, the softness in her voice, the way she made him feel seen. Margaret found herself doing the same, recalling his patience, his care, the gentle way he respected boundaries even when the heart wanted otherwise. Neither acted, neither crossed the invisible line, yet both felt the tension as a constant, living thing, a quiet pulse between them. The broken couch had created an unlikely closeness, a situation that neither would have chosen, yet both would never forget. And then one night, as the rain poured against the windows, Margaret's hand brushed Ethan's again, accidentally but intentionally, a touch that neither pulled from. The thunder rolled outside, matching the silent storm that raged inside the room. For a single, fleeting moment, they both acknowledged it, a spark of what could have been, and then, as quickly, withdrew, knowing the risk, knowing the consequences. Yet the memory lingered, heavier than any words, more binding than any promise. They had seen each other in a way that changed their relationship, made it deeper, more tender, and more dangerous. By the end of the week, Ethan realized he could no longer see Margaret as only his mother-in-law. She had become someone he noticed, someone who occupied space in his mind even when the house was quiet. Margaret realized the same, feeling a pull she had not anticipated, a gentle longing she could neither name nor deny. And so, they continued, careful and aware, navigating a path lined with unspoken emotions, each night teaching them something new, each glance a reminder of how fragile, how fleeting, and how beautiful connection could be. The house settled around them, unaware of the subtle storm inside. Lily slept peacefully, oblivious to the complexity that had grown in her home. And Ethan and Margaret, bound by circumstance and unspoken understanding, lay quietly, hearts racing, minds aware, knowing that the line had been approached, the bond had been formed, and the future would require courage, patience, and restraint. That was the night they understood that closeness could exist without crossing boundaries, that care could become dangerous, and that love, in all its forms, could be complicated, fragile, and quietly consuming. And as dawn approached, both of them held their breath, wondering how much longer they could resist the pull that had begun with a broken couch, a sleepless night, and the gentle insistence of someone who cared. The storm had passed, but its echoes lingered in the house, quiet and restless. Ethan lay awake in the living room, the couch now fixed but still feeling foreign beneath him, the night stretching endlessly around him. Upstairs, Lily slept peacefully, finally recovering from her illness, her breathing even, her presence a gentle reminder of why boundaries had to hold. Ethan thought about Margaret, about the closeness that had grown between them, about the small touches, the whispered conversations, the long nights spent side by side. He felt the weight of it all, the tension that had built in his chest, knowing it could not be ignored but also knowing it could not be acted upon. Margaret, too, was awake, lying in her own bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering the moments that had brought them to this point. The accidental brushes of hands, the soft voices in the dark, the shared stories of life, loss, and longing. She understood the power of these nights, how quickly familiarity and care could turn into something dangerous if left unchecked. Her heart ached with recognition, not guilt, but awareness of desire restrained, of emotions honored, yet teetering at the edge of temptation. The following morning, she spoke to Ethan with a clarity that was almost painful. "We need space," she said softly, her eyes holding his with steady sincerity. "Feelings like this can be confusing, and they shouldn't come between family." Ethan nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat, understanding that she was right, even if his heart whispered otherwise. They had seen each other clearly, had felt something undeniable, but now they had to choose restraint, for Lily, for the family, for the life they shared in this house. Ethan took it upon himself to fix the couch entirely, working until his hands ached, focusing on the task so that his mind would not wander toward dangerous thoughts. Hammering and screwing became a meditation, a physical way to redirect energy that had been building for days. By the evening, the living room was orderly again, the couch restored, solid and dependable, a symbol of normalcy returning. He slept downstairs that night, alone, the emptiness of the room both comforting and lonely, a reminder that control was possible, but desire lingered just beneath the surface. Margaret stayed upstairs, occasionally glancing toward the staircase, feeling the absence of his presence beside her, a quiet ache that was impossible to ignore. She understood that emotions were complicated, but she had chosen the harder path, the one that kept family intact rather than yielding to temptation. Her respect for Ethan grew, not just for his care and patience, but for his ability to honor boundaries, even when it was difficult, even when it cost him. Lily woke the next day, stronger, brighter, unaware of the emotional storm that had almost changed everything. Her laughter echoed through the halls, a lightness that reminded Ethan and Margaret of why they had to resist, why their actions had to be careful. They shared fewer words than before, but when they did speak, the respect and understanding between them was deeper, more meaningful. Even with distance restored, they both knew that what had passed between them was real, had left a mark, and could never be entirely erased. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly returned to its normal rhythm, yet subtle changes persisted. Ethan found himself more aware of Margaret's presence, noticing the quiet strength in her gestures, the careful kindness in her words, the way she seemed to hold the household together with grace and patience. Margaret noticed him too, admiring his steady support for Lily, his calmness in chaos, the way he carried himself with responsibility and care. Though the tension of the nights had dissipated, a quiet connection lingered, invisible yet undeniable, a shared understanding of emotions that were neither acted upon nor ignored. One evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the walls, Ethan paused at the doorway to the kitchen, seeing Margaret arrange flowers in a vase, her movements deliberate, peaceful. He felt a pang of longing, a reminder that the heart did not forget easily, that emotions could remain even when action was impossible. Margaret caught his gaze, smiled faintly, and in that simple gesture, they acknowledged the bond they had formed, without words, without crossing lines. It was a recognition of humanity, of shared experience, of understanding that love could exist in many forms, not all of which demanded fulfillment. The house itself seemed to hold its breath for a moment, quiet and still, carrying the memory of nights past, the conversations whispered in the dark, the small touches that had almost shifted the balance. Ethan moved on to his evening tasks, washing dishes, tidying up, his mind both present and wandering, remembering moments of tenderness and restraint. Margaret returned to her own work, arranging the home, preparing for Lily's return to school, carrying a quiet satisfaction in knowing that they had chosen wisely, even when the choice had been painful. They both learned the value of boundaries, the importance of self-control, and the strength it took to protect relationships and family. The experience changed them, not in visible ways, but in subtle shifts of understanding, in quiet compassion, in respect for the fragility of desire and the weight of responsibility. Ethan began to appreciate Margaret not just as Lily's mother, but as a human being, someone who carried life's challenges with dignity, someone capable of warmth and strength, someone whose presence mattered beyond circumstance. Margaret, in turn, saw Ethan in a new light, recognizing his integrity, his patience, his ability to care without taking advantage, and his gentle respect for family and boundaries. They never returned to the same closeness of those stormy nights, yet the memory remained, a silent thread connecting them. Sometimes, late at night, Ethan would think of the broken couch, the nights spent side by side, the conversations that had unfolded in quiet darkness. He remembered the small touches, the glances, the warmth, and felt both gratitude and restraint, knowing that what could have been was kept safe by wisdom and respect. Margaret remembered too, sometimes catching herself recalling the fleeting closeness, the shared understanding, the subtle ache that had not been acted upon. She carried it quietly, a reminder that love and care could exist without ownership, without breaking trust, without destroying family. The household continued, filled with the routines of life, work, school, meals, and small moments of laughter. Lily thrived, oblivious to the emotional storms that had brushed against the adults around her. Ethan and Margaret moved through their days with renewed awareness, careful in gestures, deliberate in words, conscious of the power of connection. Even in ordinary moments, they respected the boundaries that had been tested, grateful for the restraint that had preserved both family and dignity. Sometimes, when Ethan fixed something around the house, Margaret would watch, a small smile on her lips, and a silent acknowledgement passed between them. It was a bond unspoken, a quiet understanding that they had survived the test of temptation and emotion, that they had honored the people they loved most. Each night, as the house grew still, they reflected in their own ways on what had passed, grateful for the lessons learned, and for the trust that remained intact. The broken couch, the stormy nights, the whispered conversations, these became memories, not regrets, reminders of the delicate balance between heart and reason, desire and duty, love and respect. And so, the house stood, quiet and strong, carrying its stories in the walls, in the rooms, in the very air. Ethan slept peacefully downstairs, Margaret upstairs, Lily in her own bed, all connected by care, by restraint, by shared love for each other. They had faced a test of temptation and emotion, and they had chosen wisely. And though the memory of closeness would linger, it existed now as a testament to maturity, restraint, and the quiet power of love that does not need to cross boundaries to be real. The house was home again, filled with warmth and life, yet underneath it all remained the knowledge that they had seen each other clearly, felt something deep, and resisted. It was a reminder that love could be gentle, careful, and restrained, and that the hardest choices sometimes bring the greatest peace. Ethan and Margaret carried the memory forward, changed but whole, their bond unbroken, their hearts aware, and their family safe. And in the quiet nights that followed, the house seemed to hold a calm satisfaction, a gentle acknowledgement that hearts could feel deeply without destroying the lives they cherished most. The story of the broken couch, the sleepless nights, and the storm of emotions became a quiet legend of restraint and understanding, of care that did not demand, of love that existed without possession. Ethan and Margaret learned that closeness could exist safely, that desire could be respected without being acted upon, and that family and trust were worth every careful step. And sometimes, in the hush of the evening, when the wind brushed the curtains and the world felt still, they both remembered, not with longing, but with gratitude. For the lessons, for the restraint, for the moments that proved that love, in all its forms, could survive, thrive, and remain beautiful without breaking the bonds that truly mattered.